Welcome to the channel. My name is Matt. I'm the owner of Matt Sokol & Company Inc., a small business consulting firm that specializes in helping businesses grow. We offer a variety of one-on-one business services to help your business. To find out more information, visit our website, mattsokol.co. Today, we are going to be discussing the other half of the most recent video, how to fill out an ST-120 New York State resale certificate so that you do not have to pay tax. But in this video, instead of helping people fill the form out, we're gonna go over everything you need to know as a business that is accepting these ST-120s and not charging a customer sales tax. Before we get started, make sure that you subscribe for more business content. Before we get into it, let me just give you some quick overview on the ST-120 Resale Certificate, which is a New York State form. The whole point of this ST-120 is for businesses to fill out if they're buying goods that they are then going to resell. And the whole application of this form is that if you fill it out, you do not have to pay sales tax on the purchase. The reason for that is if you're in the business of reselling goods, you should ultimately be collecting sales tax from the end user on every transaction. And so if you're buying those goods to resell, you don't have to pay the sales tax, but you do need to collect it from the customer. And so that is the whole point of the ST-120, to allow businesses to not pay sales tax on items that they are going to be reselling. So we're gonna jump into my computer here, and you can see that I have this form filled out from the demo that I did. And if you're looking for that video of how to fill out the ST-120 form, that will be in the description below. But for this one, I have it all filled out. We could go through it briefly. Most of it's pretty self-explanatory. So the name of the seller, and this form is supposed to be entirely filled out generally by the buyer, unless you as the seller want to perhaps have one that has your name and address on it that you can provide to customers to fill out just to make their life a little bit easier so they don't have to look for your address information. That's fine too. So name of seller, the address of course, and then the name of the purchaser and address. Now, mark an X in the appropriate box. Single use certificate or blanket certificate. Generally, majority of the time, you want a blanket certificate. Basically, a blanket certificate means that you can retain this form on file and use it moving forward. A single use certificate means that this form is specific for one transaction. And if it's the case that it is a single use certificate, it has to be dated within 90 days of that transaction. That's a New York State requirement. But I recommend blanket certificate because usually you want to get a repeat business, you want to continue to do business with the same customers, and just having this form on file and getting it once, you'll be good to go. To the purchaser, you may not use this certificate to purchase items or services that are not for resale, which is pretty self-explanatory. As I said, the whole point of this is if you don't have to pay sales tax, the government wants to know that you're going to be collecting it from the end consumer ultimately. This is not for purchasing goods to use personally, only for resale. Now moving down to purchaser information. I am engaged in the business of blank and principally sell blank. Generally, it's going to be engaged in the business of buying and selling or something similar, and principally sell, and then whatever, of course, the item is or the industry is. Now moving down to the next part, there's two options, either part 1 or part 2. Part 1 is completed by registered sales tax vendors in New York State only. Any out-of-state people should complete part 2. In most cases, if you're selling to another business in New York State, they're going to select this top option, which is a New York State vendor, show vendor, or entertainment vendor. My valid certificate of authority number is, and then they put their certificate of authority number. Or the other option is if they're a temporary vendor and then still they put their certificate of authority number and the expiration date. What is a certificate of authority number and what is a certificate of authority? So a certificate of authority is basically the document that indicates that the government has approved you to collect and file sales tax on behalf of the state. In New York State, it's typically a little orange card. If you go to like a small business or shop, you might even see them hanging on the wall, as that's what they're supposed to be doing for businesses like that, just to show that we are a valid sales tax vendor and we're allowed to be collecting sales tax. And of course, they're registered with the state. So they fill that out, then you go down to I am purchasing. In majority of cases, it's going to be A, which is tangible personal property for resale, or B, which is a service for resale, including the servicing of tangible personal property held for sale. So that'd be if you're reselling a service, or C, restaurant type food, or heated drink for resale, which is essentially if you're reselling food. You'd be C. And if you are not a New York State vendor, then they would fill out part 2, in which they put their state or jurisdiction in this first blank. It says, I am registered to collect sales tax in the following state jurisdiction and have been issued the following registration number. If sales tax or VAT registration is not required and a registration number is not issued by your home jurisdiction, indicate the location of your business and write non-applicable on the line. So you're supposed to put either your tax ID, or if you're not required to have one by the state, you could put NA. And then I am purchasing. Generally, it's going to be E, the tangible personal property for resale that will be resold by a business located outside New York State. Or D is essentially if you're reselling a good and the vendor that you're buying it from is delivering it directly to your customer in New York State, very specific application that you're probably not going to see too much. And then finally, they would put their name, position, the date, they would print it out and they would sign it. It's just a quick rundown of how this form is supposed to look after it is filled out by your customer. Now, this is a pretty simple one-page form, the ST-120. And if you go to the second page, the entire second page is instructions. I do my best to sum everything up so it's very easily digestible for you and very easy to understand. So quickly, we'll go over misuse of this certificate. Misuse of this exemption certificate may subject you to serious civil and criminal sanctions in addition to the payment of any tax and interest due. These penalties include a penalty equal to 100% of the tax due, a $50 penalty for each fraudulent exemption certificate issued, as well as a couple other things, including revocation of your certificate of authority and punishable by a substantial fine and possible jail sentence, although that's pretty unlikely. To the seller, if you're a New York State registered vendor and accept an exemption document, you'll be protected from liability for the tax if the certificate is valid. Okay, the certificate will be considered valid if it was 1. Accepted in good faith. According to their definition, a certificate is accepted in good faith when a seller has no knowledge that the exemption certificate is false or is fraudulently given, and reasonable ordinary due care is exercised in the acceptance of the certificate. So in regards to this whole good faith thing, New York has somewhat loose laws about this because you don't actually need to file or check or do anything to this form besides just accept it in good faith and retain it on file. And that's the whole point of this form, is to retain it on file. And this way, in the event of an audit or some sort of sales tax inquiry into your business, you can provide them with all the signed ST-120s and go, this is why we didn't collect sales tax from these customers. And you'll be totally covered. And like it said in the first line, you will be protected from liability for the tax if the certificate is valid. In addition to accepting it in good faith, if it's a single-use certificate, like we mentioned earlier, which I do not recommend using, it must be within 90 days of the transaction. It must be dated. 90 days of the transaction, the document must be dated for single use only. And then lastly, it's got to be properly completed. All required entries were made. So obviously you need all the information from the person. They can't just put their company name and no address. They can't not give you their tax ID number. And generally, this form is used for New York State to New York State vendors. I know there's a section for out-of-state vendors, but typically, without getting too into it, every state has different sales tax laws, and every state has different sales tax thresholds that you have to meet before you're required to actually collect and file sales tax in that state. So generally, if New York is your only nexus, the only state that you meet that requirement in, generally you only worry about collecting sales tax for sales in New York State. If you want to have all your bases covered 100%, like I said, then of course you could send the ST-120 to out-of-state customers as well. And that's pretty much how that works. Very simple. But I recently found out something, is that you can actually go the extra step if you want to. And again, it's really up to you, but you don't have to. Good faith just means that everything that you've seen indicates that this is a 100% valid business and you have no reason to believe that anything is awry. But if you want to go the extra step, down below I put a link to the New York State website. So if you want to go the extra mile, we actually can look up sales tax vendor information. If you have the EIN or the certificate of authority number, you could type that in, click continue, and it'll tell you the name of the business, if there is one, and the registered address. So that's a way to verify the information if you want to go that extra step to make sure that the person that filled out the form is a legit business and you're good to go. And after that, you're 100% thorough. Every single T is crossed, every single I is dotted, and you're good to go. Hopefully that clears some things up for you and helped you with any questions you have about the ST-120. If you have any other questions, or if you have more questions about this, feel free to comment them down below. I'm looking for new ideas and new content to produce to answer some of your small business questions. So that's it. Again, I'm Matt Sokol. If you want to check out our consulting services, the link is in the description below, mattsokol.co. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Give the video a thumbs up, and I'll see you in the next one.